Welcome everybody to Virtual Bourbon Try It series. Today we have a great lineup from Deerhammer Distillery in Buena Vista, Colorado, and special guest, owner distiller Lenny Eckstein. Hey, Lenny.
Hey, what's up, McNew and everyone?
Hey, how are you?
Doing great. Stoked to be here.
Awesome. So most of everybody here is familiar with you, but for those who aren't, go ahead and tell us about Deerhammer and how you got started in distilling.
Right. Well, very relevant to the question. Just yesterday, my wife and partner at Deerhammer, Amy, and I were chatting about how we got started. And, she's got this other side project that she wants to do that's not all that related to Deerhammer, but kind of touches a little bit. And what she was saying was like, as she does this, she wants to do what we did not do with Deerhammer, which was actually have a business plan and decide what we're going to do ahead of time. And I was thinking back, I was like, God, I guess we didn't. So to rewind back a little bit and to tell you a little bit about Deerhammer, it was something that came out of like my kooky idea at the time back in probably around 2009. I had been homebrewing for an excessive amount of time, huge volumes for a home brewer. And that kind of, parlayed into home distilling. And I just decided it was something I really wanted to try, but to the point of no business plan, we weren't really looking for what we needed, and we didn't know it at the time. We were trying to rent these crappy little industrial spaces wherever we could find them, and they never quite panned out. So we ended up in this bigger building, and all of a sudden, the reason for no business plan was I just was buying junky old equipment and the smallest or the biggest still I could afford. And that was back in 2010. The whole impetus behind it was that I wanted to make whiskey, and as craft distilling was starting to gain momentum, and it still didn't really have much of a place necessarily in the whiskey landscape or the bourbon landscape. My thought was, what can we bring to it? I want to do something neat. And what it's turned into, fast forward 10 or so years later, for me anyway, and I think my team and the guys I get to work with is our own creative expression in looking at styles, looking at, for sure single malt, which we're most known for, and trying to put our thumbprint on what American single malt will potentially be about, since it's not so much defined as bourbon. But then, we make a 4-grain bourbon, and our approach is always to say, okay, bourbon, what can it be? What is it? What can we bring to it? And I love working with our crew and saying like, oh, what if we did, what if we use some oats? What if we toasted or smoked those oats? What about specialty malt? What about more heritage varieties of corn, which isn't necessarily a new thing, but it's always with an intention to place our flavor profile a little bit left to center. And, fast forward 10 years later or so, and things are going pretty good. We're having a good time making things we really enjoy, and it's fun to share it with everyone. So
yeah, we're glad you're sharing it with us.
Yeah.
So you posted on Instagram last week about a lost barrel.
Oh, right.
So tell us about that and what we can expect out of it.
Oh, yeah. Well, it kind of, made me like sort of chuckle in the sense that, it could certainly be a marketing angle and has been for some bigger companies. And that's never really been what we're about. The marketing side is obviously like important. And I do find a lot of fun in it. But in this case,
live right now, so
yeah, in this case, I use software to track everything in the rack house, and we kind of have to do it for government compliance, but I don't love staring at computers. I'm definitely more inclined.
You may want to mute Ray.
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's all good, man. Computers. More hands, less tech, like my background was always in computers. So while we do have to track everything super diligently, lost barrels. I don't like to look at our software and see where things are. I find it more fun to kind of in the back of my head think like, I think there's some 4 or 5 year barrels like buried back there somewhere. And sometimes I can fit between the barrels with a flashlight and find them. I mean, in all honesty, I could hop on the computer and find them. Mm-hmm. But this was the case of like, I didn't think we had any that were of like hitting bottled and bond for a few more months. So we found that one. It's super tasty, and that's always a nice surprise. So more analog, less digital.
Yeah, awesome.
Yes.
Awesome. So we're excited whenever that comes out, you're bottled and bond. But tonight we have a rye and some American single malts to try. So let's jump into those.
Yeah. So our rye is something, both, bourbon and rye are something we started years after we started Deerhammer. And there were a few reasons why. I mentioned that we wanted to really focus on American single malt first. I don't know if that was the best business move. I mean, we for sure, in hindsight, should have made bourbon first, which, we're selling so much of that we're kind of low on it. That's why I didn't include it in this tasting. But rye came soon after. And as I was kind of speaking to earlier, our approach with this rye was, what can we do? What will be unique? And what will, while I'm not huge to talk up terroir or like taste of place, what will make this a Colorado rye? And, in working with my crew, what we came up with was, and I always get the numbers wrong, but I'll see if I can get it right. 70% Colorado grown Elbon rye, which is a rye varietal that does exceptionally well in dry, sandy soil, more arid climates. So we want to use something that is natural to our region. That was Elbon rye. Coming from a beer background, I'm big on oats for both flavor and texture. So we went about 20% oats, and then we rounded it out. Something that kind of marries all of our stuff together is the use of specialty malt or malted barley that's either kilned or roasted to different levels to contribute either, coffee notes or honey or raisin. They're all just different. If there's a painting, they'd be different colors. In whiskey, it's like seasoning or flavors. So we're very big on impactful components and grain bill. This rye, this one measures in at 88 proof. And I find that, I think everyone likes and wants the higher proof, and I get that. I'd love to release a cask strength version of this, but as of now, it's usually just the single barrels that stores will pick, which usually weighs in at about 107. But this one being 88, I'm going to pour myself some now as I spill it on my leg. I'd invite you guys to all either float questions if I forgot anything significant, or let me know what you
Where are you located? I don't know where you are. Where are you located at?
Oh, we are located in Buena Vista, Colorado. It's smack dab in the center of Colorado. And the rye for this, the Elbon rye, is grown in the San Luis Valley, which is just a little bit south of us. It's right near the Great Sand Dunes National Park. And it's a pretty cool area. Great mountain biking down there, too.
Nice.
Lenny, is this your batch 1 or batch 2?
This would be batch 3.
3. Okay.
Yeah, we're sneaking up.
Okay. We've got 2 here and I love that one.
Yeah. Something that's going to happen, and I'll try to keep it tame. So I handed off 6 bottles to Mr. Akeley when he was out visiting in April, was it, with Bill? And
Yeah.
I've got this thing where, I don't know, like every new batch is my new favorite for sure. And I try not to snub past batches, but I always like the new ones more. It's exciting. It's like, it's the new thing. It's, I don't know. Like if you had a new wife or something, I don't know. I think that's a bad comparison. So anyway, yeah, batch 3 is really nice. And then something else we do, this is kind of weird, but being such a small distillery, we might vat together or marry together anywhere from like 6 to 10 barrels, but we might only actually need 3 or 4 of those barrels for our bottling to distribute out to Colorado and beyond. So we put that blend of barrels back into the barrels and let it sit longer. So what's kind of cool is batch 3, God, maybe we bottled that in like March, but fast forward a few months later, 6 months, a year, we'll still have that same culmination in barrels. So it's always fun to revisit it. So yeah, batch 3 though. I like it.
Kevin Rose wants to know in the chat, what do you use for yeast? Is it the same every time or do you change it up for batch?
Yeah. Oh, okay. So that's an interesting question. The short answer is yes, it's the same every time. The longer answer is it depends on, we made a switch at a certain point. We went through 10 or 15 different yeast options and settled on, I believe it was USW6, which is regarded as by the yeast supplier, a traditional American bourbon yeast. And they won't disclose what distillery it was originally harvested from, but we went with that for a long stretch. And about 2 years ago, we started experimenting with other yeast strains that were known to be a little higher in ester formation. So we tried at least 3 and back to back compared all of the new make spirit. So we tried USW6, D53, and M1. Now I know these are just letters and numbers. I got to be honest, they're all very similar. I know that people celebrate drastic differences in yeast, and I would never diminish that, but there's ways to get different flavors. So when you do everything identical, even the temperature, everything, some yeast can be very different. These weren't totally different, but guys, a long-winded way of saying M1, which is a malt strain of yeast, we found to be beneficial in all of our whiskeys. It lends a really nice confectionery note. It almost reminds me of like the white icing on top of those cheap, janky oatmeal cookies, which I like, even though they're cheap. It's delicious. So yes, we use M1 for almost everything, unless it's an odd experiment. Like we've got a pitch of yeast that's been propagated up for us by a brewery that's all Brettanomyces that's going into a collaboration project. So every once in a while we do some different stuff, but this rye is M1 yeast. Now, where it gets kind of weird is some of the barrels that went into this blend were the USW6 and some are M1. So it depends on the maturation from when we switched.
And information. Let's try this one if everybody hasn't yet.
And I guess what I would make known for all of our offerings, but particularly ones that have an established style like rye, you guys all know so much of the rye out there originated from one distillery. So there was a very specific rye profile. And then you get some new stuff like, well, not necessarily new, but, like Pikesville, out of Heaven Hill, or, so many cool things out there now. And I just think there's room to challenge the standard notion of rye, of like the peppery notes and, and sometimes the dill notes. I've come to really enjoy the grassy notes in rye. But I get some other things in this one. I don't want to necessarily like plant what I get out of this. I'm curious what you guys get, be it on aroma, or I'm always particularly curious about the finish, because everything we do is traditional double pot still distillation, no columns, no plates. So I tend to think that leaves a pretty long finish, even at 88 proof.
Yeah, so I'm getting an interesting finish, one that I don't typically get, but I don't want to plan it either. So somebody just jump in and tell us what you're getting, because this one's interesting. It's good.
Chocolate mint.
Yeah, I get a lot of that.
Mint.
Makes
I
me,
get a
No.
smokiness.
Okay, yeah. Kind of grilled peaches, I think. That's what I get.
I was getting like a coffee finish.
Yeah,
Coffee.
yeah, I get a lot of cream coffee on this,
Yeah.
but also that mint is very prevalent. This is a fun one, and at higher proof, like out of the barrel, we go into our barrel pretty low proof, 105. It'll come out 108, 110. I find that both our rye and bourbon have a bit of a savory note to them. They there's always some level of sweet backbone, but yeah, I don't know. I always get like a little bit of a savory component.
This is, hi, Lenny, I'm Leah. This is totally different than any rye I've ever tasted. I live back east. I'm in Brooklyn. It's completely different than some of my favorite Northeastern ryes. The ryes from Pennsylvania, the ryes from New York,
Maryland.
Pennsylvania, Maryland, New York. Virginia is doing some beautiful ryes. This is nothing like any of those. It's so different. It's so enjoyable. I got a really almost like 95% chocolate bar,
Yeah.
super dark chocolate, bitter dark chocolate on the palate, with mint, and I got like hazelnut. I wrote Nutella on the
Oh,
finish.
Yeah.
I
That's
don't
cool.
know if you're familiar with Nutella, but I really had this like do dark chocolate, tobacco-y, hazelnutty palate and finish. And it's so kind of surprising on a rye.
Yeah, and I think I could, speculate as to where those things come from. I tend to think that the oats lend the creaminess that would especially play into like something like a Nutella descriptor. Something else worth mentioning, we do use the last 10% when I say specialty malt. It's a split of chocolate malt and dark crystal malt. So those also punch up kind of the chocolatey kind of notes. And then furthermore, we go almost exclusively into heavy toast #2 char, New Oak 53 gallon from Independent Stave. And that heavy toast is another thing that, while it often contributes baking spices, I think it also really accentuates the chocolate. So that's definitely one of our house attributes that kind of permeates through all our whiskeys a bit, but it plays neat in a rye where it doesn't usually exist.
Nice.
I'm not really a coffee drinker, but I'm getting like a deep roasted coffee on this that I'm really
I
enjoying.
got
Yeah. See, that's the fun thing about owning a whiskey distillery. You get to make flavors that you like. I drink an insane amount of coffee and eat chocolate every day. So those are my sensibilities.
Loving it.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, this is a neat one for us. I want to say we launched it about 1.5 years ago. The barrels maturation wise that go into our blends currently range from 2.5 to 4.5 years. And something that's been really cool about becoming a more, I guess, mature on the small side of medium craft distillery is that we finally have enough barrel stores that blending is more of an exercise of coming up with the flavor profile that we really want, which is what everyone says. But I gotta be honest, like back in the day, it was an exercise in casting aside the ones that sucked and deciding which ones were the best we could do. And it's totally different now. So it's much more rewarding.
Lenny, can you describe the climate in Buena Vista, Colorado, and also the conditions in your rick house? Are they heated, not heated? How does that, how do your barrels live?
Well, right now where we're stored, and you're kind of looking down at it, although it's hard to see. We do climate control primarily because just above me, there's our sprinklers. So fire suppression, it's not a dry system, so we have to keep it from freezing. So through the winter, we run the temperatures at about 50 to 60 Fahrenheit. So it does cool down. We just maintain it there. In the summer, it's borderline like sweating temperature right now, especially being up in the loft. So it gets pretty warm, but the mornings are very cool. Now, obviously, the swing from thermal mass in the barrel isn't going to happen that quickly, but still, it does get those shifts. Pressure systems, barometric pressures out here are certainly not the most drastic in the world, but pretty drastic. And then I would say insanely dry, which is an interesting component that we embrace. We don't run humidifiers. It's been a very rainy summer. This past July, it's rained so much that our, what's it called? What's a humidity gauge? I forgot. I don't remember.
Hygrometer?
Hygrometer, maybe. Yeah.
Hygrometer.
It's on like, like downright muggy East Coast measurements right now. It's so wet out here, but that won't last long. It's about to dry out this week. So very dry. Our stacks are 5 barrels high. So one floor, just 5 high, not that high enough to climb on. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I left something out but it's a pretty high. We're at 8,000 feet and it's pretty dry out here. So yeah, different climate for sure than Kentucky or most places.
Yeah. So Adina threw into the chat that it's like a thin mint cookie dipped in espresso, and I think that kind of wraps up what everybody was getting. That was a perfect descriptor.
Yeah.
So let's jump into this hickory smoked corn whiskey. It's that label, if you guys are looking for it.
Double big cork. Yeah. So right off the cuff, I don't know if you guys have it on your label, but I'll try to see if this is evident. This is our Colonel Steve Akeley series on the bottle.
Yeah. And
Pretty
this one
nice.
got reviews from Jeff at Bourbon Banter too.
Yeah,
Oh,
just
yeah,
got a
yeah.
nice review. Got a
The
very nice
whiskey
review.
fellow.
Yeah. And that's the everyday label. This is not the like barrel pick or anything like that. I mean, he's all in on marketing with the Colonel Steve on
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yes, this
Sales
is,
are up too. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just on the surface, label wise, that is something we've done since the beginning, is rotate in various personalities. So yes, that the current Steve, you graced it as the current personality. A little bit about this one, as we got moving forward with grain in traditional American whiskeys, it was kind of hard to ignore corn whiskey to me. I find it fascinating that, it just doesn't necessarily have more traction because it's a little off from bourbon. It doesn't go into charred new oak. It has to be, God, let me see if I get this right, 85% corn at minimum. We go 100% corn just to be kind of weird and step up to the challenge. It's often said that while corn has flavor, it needs other flavoring grains to really stand out, like rye or wheat or a little barley. I looked at that and said, well, what can we do with corn? Let's get some really cool corn down in the southwest of Colorado. It's grown by the Ute Mountain tribe, Ute Mountain Farm. And it's, it's non-GMO organic, but primarily it's the corn that thrives in that area. It's a food grade corn. And we smoke at least 10% of that grain bill for 8 hours in a cold smoker that we have at Deerhammer. And it's a big pain in the butt process that fortunately I don't really have to do anymore. My crew does it, but we hickory smoke it. We sour mash just like we do most of our stuff, really for more of a pH adjustment. We do a 4-day open ferment. We double pot distill, and per the code that the TTB sets forth, it cannot be aged in charred new oak, but it can be aged in charred used oak. So from the onset, we thought, hey, corn whiskey, this would be great. We could have a whiskey to bottle in 8 to 12 months. And we did, and it was pretty good. But then we realized that it tastes a lot better after 3 years. So now it's more or less a 3-year product. This one is the ABV Network pick. It was my favorite barrel until Steve took it, and it still is, I guess, but now it's in bottles.
Yes.
So I'm curious what you guys think about this, knowing that background. That's kind of the rundown on it.
Awesome.
I get just like a barbecue chip because I love barbecue chips.
Barbecue chips, yeah.
Yeah.
That works.
Yeah. And then John was saying it smelled like a sweet honey ham.
Yeah. I
Dave and
definitely.
Adina, maple bacon, popcorn.
Yeah, I was getting like the grilled corn, like Mexican style.
Street corn, yeah.
Yeah, the sweet corn.
A goof component of this is that for those of you who've been out to Deerhammer, particularly in the summer, we've for the last 5+ years have had an amazing food truck that parks on our patio and slings burgers. And we always like the idea of trying to offer up something that does well with burgers. And we love making hickory smoked old fashions with this stuff as a compliment to a really awesome burger.
You know what else goes really good with this? The chili Fritos.
Yes.
Oh,
Awesome.
that.
Oh,
Somebody keeps
okay.
calling me.
Actually works good in award-winning tiki cocktails, I should say, too.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Somehow Dave made everything Colorado tiki, and that was a feat in itself. That was great.
What was it called? Like the flaming squirt boater?
Wait, Buena Vista Beach Party.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Yep.
There was a man in the boat in the cocktail. That's
There
for
was a
sure.
flaming squirt boat involved, though.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, this goes really well with a roasted pistachio orgeat. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's really, I mean, I touch on this a few times, but what keeps us going and what keeps us, loving to come to work, and by us, I mean me, because my wife doesn't always love to come to work as she does. Don't tell her I said this. She does the harder part of the job for sure.
She's working on her retirement, I hear.
Yeah. But it's like, it's really just looking at styles and trying to deviate. And sometimes, if we were a much bigger brand, being so far left of center could be problematic in some ways. because then, the marketing that's required to really get people on board, significant. And in our case, we move maybe 3,000 cases a year. It's, I hate to say it's gonna happen because there's a lot of work that goes into it, but we can get away with doing these left of center offerings that don't conform. And this is one of them for sure. We sell the least of this, but when I go to any sort of bourbon fest or any spirits fest, this is always the crowd favorite. They just don't know it when it's on the shelf.
So I got a question. Could you give us a pseudo definition of what American single malt is?
Yeah. I guess we're about to get into that one next anyway. Well, I think everyone has a pretty firm grasp on when one says single malt, what that typically hints at. And I think, props to Scotland for, really cornering that market and doing some amazing things for so long. Their definition in brief and cutting out some of the things would be 100% malted barley made by one distillery. Over there, it would be in a pot still. And to be Scotch, it would be made in Scotland. But other regions make single malts and are recognized as single malts, be it, Ireland, Japan, there's a bunch. So why not this country where we have such a barley growing tradition? We're so big with beer that leverages barley so heavily. You guys might be aware, but the government, the TTB, doesn't really recognize American single malt. They do recognize a category for malt whiskey, and their definition of malt whiskey would be similar to that of a wheat whiskey or a rye. It has to be at least 51% malted barley, be aged in charred new oak. There's probably a few other things like, there's a limit to what it can come off the still at, the proof they can go into a barrel at. But there's also a big initiative led by some folks, mainly the guys at Westland, but there's a lot of other players involved, which formed up the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission with the intention of getting the government to recognize this style. And while the definitions aren't 100% what I would have, been anchoring for, they're pretty close. And I'm super stoked that it sounds like the government might finally give it the thumbs up this year. And, by no means do I expect it to put a dent in the bourbon market or bourbon's market share, but I think it'll be pretty interesting once people hear more about it. For us, what it means, and I guess for the broader category around the country, it would mean 100% malted barley made by one distillery, not necessarily requiring a pot still, but we do use double pot still distillation, not necessarily requiring charred new oak, but we do like charred new oak. Even we'll experiment with used oak here and there. I like new oak better. There's probably a few other things I'm forgetting, but that's kind of the gist of American single malt. And there's a lot of producers making American single malt now. It was pretty cool asking Freddie No about it. And he was like, yeah, we might have something coming down the pike. That's awesome. I can't wait for the big guys to jump in. So I hope maybe that answered your question. I don't know. I just kind of spun crazy on single malt.
Lenny, could you tell us where you got your stills and how you chose them?
Yeah, well, our very first still is a copper pot still made by hand by the Colonel out of, where is he? Not you.
Oh, I was gonna say I didn't remember doing that, so
there's a guy. Where is he? This was so long ago. We ordered it in 2010. We still have it actually, although we decommissioned it. But our first still was 150-gallon direct fire pot still. In my mind, and the reason why I went with it was it had a similar shape to something out of Scotland, where like a very pronounced onion, tall tapered neck, straight line arm into a condenser. We ran that for a long time. We ran double duty on that thing because it was the only still we had, and we were making single malt. And since single malt is typically laudered, or you separate the liquids from the grain, you can direct fire that without scorching the grain. That's something I'm really into. The kettle caramelization, the Maillard reaction you get from direct fire, that's not something that you can easily get from a steam jacketed pot still. The dilemma is our fire inspectors hated it, and we risked
Yeah.
shut down. I mean, we more or less were shut down. Our
Right.
insurance company also hated it, and they dropped our insurance. So
Got
you
it.
can't operate without insurance.
Yeah.
So that was one of the most stressful things we've ever dealt with. We decided that it made sense to decommission that still, with hopes and aspirations of setting it up outside on our land and doing, a couple nights a year of direct fire campouts.
Mhm.
But we quickly moved to, I left out a step. We did bring in a 650 gallon stripping still made by Trident Stills up in Etna, Maine, that was custom made for us. A very squat head pot still. And then after the insurance incident, we moved to replace our spirit still from direct fire to a steam jacketed spirit still, made by the crew at American Beverage Equipment in Lincoln, Nebraska. So now we operate a very batch operation where we'll mill about 1,200 to 1,300 pounds of grain. We'll mash that in our 20 barrel mash tun or cereal cooker. That'll yield 650 gallons of fermentation, of which we have 3 open fermenters, 4 days in the fermenter. That all goes into the stripping still. That'll yield about 100 or so gallons of low wines. That'll go into our spirit still, and that yields about 1 barrel of whatever.
Yeah, a lot
So
of
it's all
work.
very linear and batch oriented.
Yeah, I just quickly just wanted to say something about that corn whiskey. I think it would be absolutely beautiful paired with trout, grilled
I just had
trout
trout
or grilled bronzino. It just spoke to me as like something that would be beautiful with grilled fish. I mean, I'd almost prefer it to white wine. It was so lovely that way. I could see so many pairing possibilities for it. It's really nice.
Oh, that's great to hear. Thank you.
Great job on that one.
Thank you. Yeah, good job picking out the barrel, Steve.
Yeah, well, there you go. You had us sold at your favorite, so we knew right away that was something we were interested in. So then we tried it. We're like, yeah, that's good stuff.
Yeah, well, I've got a new favorite now.
Okay.
Before
It's
we,
coming back out there soon, so get ready.
Yeah, before we jump into these single malts, Kevin Rose had a left of center tasting note, which was a hint of grape bubblegum.
Ah, interesting.
Interesting.
Sure. Good pick. I could see that.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, like Bubblicious.
Yeah, we're getting away from our juicy fruit with Bubblicious now.
We do bubble yum. Maybe it was bubble yum.
All right, so we will jump into these single malts. The first one is the Eddie Line Restaurant and Brewery pick. It's 110 proof.
Yeah. So we're starting to get a lot more into, like everyone, more into barrel picks and issuing out these single barrels, and I really enjoy that. It's something that we do. I always maintain at least 10 barrels of our American single malt. That is our favorite American single malt, ranging anywhere from 2.5 to 4 years. And I always jot down a little single or double food word descriptor for each, but I make it small enough that when a prospective account comes in to pick, they would have to look really close to see it, because I don't want to plant that, but I like to know. Eddie Line Brewery is they've kind of become one of the bigger breweries in Colorado. They've branched out. They have a brewery in New Zealand now as well. And they're awesome folks. They with COVID laws, I think in most states, they're now allowed to sell bottles. So a lot of bars are getting on board with barrel picks and selling bottles. They probably sell more whiskey than we do at our tasting room. We need to take notes on their salesmanship. But I guess to speak, I talked about American single malt forever. Ours in particular, what I think is our style, and somewhat unique to us, although I think some other distilleries either did it, in parallel to us, or, found their own way that was similar. Our grain bill it's 100% malted barley. It's 80% pale two-row malt. So very standard to a base malt that could be used in any whiskey, not a 6-row, which is higher in diastatic power, or basically enzymes that one would need to convert all the starch to sugar. We have enzymes in pretty much all that 80%. 2-row typically is known to have better flavor profiles than 6-row, or I shouldn't say better, different. flavor profile. A little more biscuity, but we round out the grain bill, the remaining 20%, with pretty much an even split of Crystal 45, which is a fairly light crystal malt that has a lot of honey character to it on its own. Crystal 120, which has a lot of raisin character, and chocolate malt, which chocolate, coffee, a little bit of an acrid component. So we mash that. We, like all of our stuff, we open ferment for 4 days, double pot distill, and go into the same heavy toast, light char, new oak barrels. This one sat for our 3 years and 110 proof. What I try to do with all our single barrels is pick ones that are a little bit of an outlier to the standard profile that we usually put out. So sometimes a little bit bigger in fruit notes, sometimes bigger in baking spice notes. But yeah, curious what you guys get on this one.
Oh, this is my favorite.
This is good. Let's get some tasting notes. Paul, what do you think about this one?
I was just putting it in the chat. I think this one's phenomenal. It's like savory and earthy up front, but it finishes like super sweet, like milk chocolate. I mean, this is a really good one.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Same thing. Kind of, I would say what Paul said, kind of almost grapey on when it first hits your tongue, but then it kind of transforms by the end of the palate to chocolatey. So, interesting.
Yeah.
Really good.
Ewald's in the chat with some tangerine, peach, and butterscotch.
Yeah, those are big ones that present a lot in a lot of our single barrels, really in all of them, but this one for sure.
Yeah. Kevin Rose and Witness Protection, what are you getting?
He can't even talk.
No, he's not
Not allowed to.
No, I would definitely agree on the butterscotch. And
There he is.
that finish really jumps around all over your palate. It's got a nice, it doesn't taste peppery, but it feels peppery, if that makes any sense. Kind of like Pop Rocks going off everywhere, but in a good way.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. Like your tongue feels like that after effect of Pop Rocks, but it's enjoyable.
Even the roof of my mouth does.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this one, so Eddie Line, they're kind of continuously buying single barrels from us. This one is part of their casks in the current series, and this one went by the name Hot Buttered Biscuits. So not that that's the only descriptor by any means, but that's what stood out to them. That like butterscotchy kind of.
Yeah, you definitely get that butterscotch too.
Yeah, a bit of cola.
This was in an ex-bourbon cask. This is like Belle Blair, a very light, like Highland Scotch, where it's very floral. It's very light, but that extra heavy toast in that char, that new oak barrel, is what makes this thing pop. I think you're 100% right on that, Lenny. It's a smart call.
I'll have to send you a sample of their most recent barrel pick, which is called Good Carmola. It was 2 years, a little over 2 years in our standard barrel profile, and then finished in our ex-bourbon barrels for a little over a year. So I'll have to float that one by you. Yeah, but that's a neat one. I thought that was at the time when Steve was out, that was the most recent single barrel we dropped. So thought that was a good one to send along.
Yeah,
great one.
Yeah. Guys, want to move on to the next one?
Yeah, this one is the mead barrel finish.
So this one is
Which one is that? Could you repeat that, please?
Yeah, it's the mead barrel, still American single malt mead barrel finish. It's 107.4 proof.
Gotcha. Thank you.
This one is a work in progress, I would say. It's still in the barrels. I believe while Steve was there, I just kind of strawed some out into a bottle. This has the potential to become a future Progeny series release, which you will try as the last one, which was our first Progeny series release. Our Progeny series is all about collaborations with other Colorado makers. And in this case, we gave barrels to Redstone Meadery out in Boulder. And as you guys might know, mead is honey wine, and they make all kinds of awesome meads. They make, traditional just fermented honey. They make meads where they also ferment fruit along with the honey. So of the barrels that comprise this one, there are traditional mead barrels, what I believe are called Sizer style, which is an apple fermented mead, and then black raspberry fermented mead as well. Very subtle fruit notes in each of them, but I think the main thing that's subtle is we're talking about honey here, and like honey barrels from the perspective of putting honey in a barrel, taking honey out of the barrel, and then putting bourbon or whatever whiskey back in the barrel. They're pretty popular right now, and I get it because it's delicious to add honey to whiskey, and it's like it's all getting to marry together in the barrel. It's 2/3 of the way to being a cocktail, which is awesome also. But my fascination kind of falls to, well, what happens when you take it in a somewhat more traditional route where whiskeys historically were so often finished in X wine barrels or X fortified wine barrels. So why not start with a fermented wine from this honey and then finish in that barrel? Now this stuff, as of now, has been in 2 years in our standard barrel profile, 2 years in X mead barrels. And I think we're going to go one more year and see what happens. I don't feel like it's ready quite yet, but I'm interested in where it's going. And I think there's some neat things going on. If you guys have ever had mead, I think it does hint at some of those earthier honey notes. And yeah,
like the nose for me is like really floral, like almost like a gin like floral.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think typically a barrel finish on bourbons or ryes, might fall in the realm of like 3 months, 6 months, a year. We're definitely pushing it because why not? I mean, we're going extra long in these barrels. I know Alan at Spirits of French Lick has some stuff going in mead barrels, and I'm really curious to sync up with him and see the progress on his stuff and what it tastes like not in the mead barrel, what it tastes like in the mead barrel. But I think this is a barrel finish that, while it's not all that available to folks, I'd love to see more of it. I think a honey wine concept is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
It really just coats the whole palate and just sits there, not in a very, not in a, it sits there a little heavy, but not in a negative way. It just kind of hangs around and you can really enjoy it. That silkiness of that honey really comes through. This is very interesting.
Yeah. Tim is painting a beautiful picture in the chat, if you guys are reading that. And then so Kevin, on that mouthfeel, the Ewalds also said velvety, and my word was buttery, but it definitely hangs out there and it's just super enjoyable.
Yeah, I think we're gonna let this one go to 5 years or so. We've got a few other progeny projects. It's really hard. I'm trying to release this in September, but there's no way I can make that happen with label printing and stuff. So I'm probably gonna kick the can down to January, but we're excited to see where this one goes. It's always fun to share works in progress.
Yeah, this one's fantastic as it is.
Really,
I can't wait till it's done.
really good, Lenny. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So is this the same one from, I think it was like one of our very first virtual bourbon events where we, you and I want to say one of your other
Nick.
Yeah, right.
went through and like tasted stuff, and then we could like pick a bottle, and then you sent, I feel like I had like a small bottle of this.
Yeah.
The same mead.
Yep. Although what you got was probably out of one single barrel. God, I gotta tell you, I don't remember if what I pulled for you guys was all of our mead barrels, which there are 10 of, or like 4 of them. I might not have felt like climbing to the top of the stack when I was hurrying to fill bottles. What I'm currently drinking is a blend of all of the barrels. But yes, Justine, that yes is the more appropriate answer. You did try that. We're terrible at keeping things under wraps. A lot of brands, when asked, what's coming out and what's new, they're usually pretty secretive for a big launch. We suck at that. I love sharing things. It doesn't.
I love this and need more of it.
Well, we got a lot, so it's coming.
But you also have a rye in the mead barrels?
No, unless I forgot, which I do sometimes.
It's the next lost barrel. He'll find it.
Yeah. We have a rye in an ex barrel aged gin barrel. We've got a rye in a brandy barrel. What else? I don't know. We've got an ex cherry cider barrel.
Okay.
Do you have anything in a rye barrel?
Yeah. God, what do we have? I'd have to look. I can't remember. We definitely do know.
Because that rye was a very unique rye, so I'd just be curious as to
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
how that would turn out.
I'll have to think more about that. Maybe I'll I don't know. Maybe I'll name it the Rose Expression or something.
Four roses.
Yeah. No lawsuit. 3 roses.
Neil and Melanie say he has rye in a rye barrel, so we got that going.
Yeah, that's a fact. No, I'm quite sure I have something in a rye barrel. I'm just drawing a blank.
Can I ask a question about this in particular? And I don't know if I'm catching on or not, but you said something. So this is not released yet because you said something about releasing it and waiting till January, maybe. So this is.
Yeah, I kind of mumbled through that one. So
yeah, can you explain that for me, please?
Yeah, so we're trying to decide if this is our next Progeny series release, which would typically be shipped to our distributor in September at the latest for, the October, November, December into January, like shipments, because everything gets a little hectic then. The dilemma is we're trying to decide between this offering and another one that's a collaboration with a winery in Colorado, where we've matured our single malt in their ex cider barrels, their ex, I'll remember the name of the wine variety in a second. And then we also made a brandy from some of their wines. So we're looking at a blend of all 3 of those offerings. And I like that a lot right now. So the dilemma is like, if I had an assistant distiller, maybe I put them on task, but drinking, sampling all day gets tough, and I'll get a ways in and then make a decision the next day. I'm not quite sure. I don't do well with deadlines. So
what would be the advantage or disadvantage of waiting until January, like you just mentioned?
Oh, because at this point, I have yet to send the artwork to the government for approval.
Okay.
And I've not sent them to our label printer. So it's more of a realistic, I wait long at this point.
All right. Thank you.
So January is my new goal. Yeah. If you want to come out here and drink it out of the barrel, we can do that. That's easy.
I would love to.
Yeah.
All right, let's check out this next one. Ray, this will probably be your new favorite. It's the port cask.
Oh
finish.
yeah.
Yeah, you're a port cask fan, and it's at 100 proof.
Yeah. So this one, I think the name is somewhat explanatory. But what's a little unique, again, it's always us trying to do things a little bit differently. We took our American single malt, matured minimum 2 years, and then moved them into port barrels. In this case, primarily a range of ex-Tawny, ex-Ruby. And what you're tasting now has been in those port barrels for anywhere from 1.5 years to 2 years, depending. I mean, it's a blend of a few of those 1.5 years to 2 years. So what's that? 3.5 to 4 years of maturation total. But it's a long time to be matured in a first use port barrel. It's a lot of port influence. But I kind of like how our single malt stands up as a backbone to that fruit character. It's I think the fruit is a good complement to everything that the single malt lays down. And our port cask finish is something we've been doing for a long time, but I really like this expression of it.
I have a question for Lenny. How did you form a connection with port makers? Really curious about that, and also can you address that a little bit? Like where is the port made, and how did you form that connection?
Totally. Well, I would say there's very little that I'm not a fan of, but historically, like I got turned on to port as what it is, and enjoying it as a dessert of sorts forever ago. So I've always kind of had an affection for it. I always linked it in my mind, to a complement to our single malt. Now, what we didn't do, and I wanted to do, was take a trip to Portugal, go from maker to maker and really form that relationship. My wife and I talked about that, but God, let's see. Our son was born maybe 3 years into Deerhammer's inception. That was his inception. And ever since then, traveling globally and doing those sorts of things has not been possible yet, although we're getting much closer. So while we didn't have the opportunity to do it in person, we've worked with barrel brokers and expressed to them, like, get us some good stuff. We've had some, and typically what we do is when they bring barrels in, I've spent anywhere from, depending on the number of barrels, 15 minutes to 2 hours, just popping bungs and sniffing barrels, discarding the ones that smell chalky or just downright muddy.
Right.
And going with the ones that have either that really nice raisiny character or the nice fruit notes. So it's really, we're relying on brokers to bring us barrels, and then we just get to pick what we like. And since we're small, I mean, we only have 10 port barrels right now, so it's not that hard to find 10 good ones out of a batch. So yeah, that's been the process. Portugal soon.
Very cool. It's delicious.
Hey, Lenny.
Delicious.
Lenny, this is kind of a dorky question. I'll own it. When you're using barrels to finish in, are you drying those out pretty well? Are they still a little wet? Or what do you prefer to use in that way, if that makes sense?
That's a great question. And it's been an evolution for us. Early on, maybe it's like, I don't know, I hate to call it an immature approach, but early on I was like, I want the wet barrels. Like, that's what it's all about. And I've definitely moved away from that, where if we're going to put stuff in there for 2 years, and this last round, our first round happened about 2 years ago, and we ran out and it took us a while to fire up the next batch. This round was much more about finding barrels that, everything that we do is very much driven by what processes seem, I don't know, in basic terms, fun and appropriate and legit. And in the same manner that it's not my style to, put something in a barrel that you could still see honey dripping out of, I no longer really want to put something in a barrel that's got a gallon of wine in it. I would rather it work its way into the wood to find that flavor and mingle that way. Now, I mean, is it that much different? I don't know. But to me, that's the sensibility we're after. So we're about to get more barrels from Jessica. I forgot the name of the company, H&C.
H&A Barrel Company.
Okay. Yeah, she's actually heading out to Colorado in a few weeks. So we're working on trying to decide which barrels to grab from her. And I guess, Kevin, to answer your question, if we get barrels and they have wine in them, I'm going to dump it out and drink it. I'm much more interested in the barrels being used, but no longer soaked. So yeah, that's kind of our take.
Lenny, as a follow-on to that, so 2 to 3 years in a port barrel or an ex-spirit barrel is a long time. Usually it's like 6 to 9 months tops. So generally you get about 2% of that former spirit after about 6 to 9 months into your whiskey. Then with 2 to 3 years, isn't that about right? Isn't that about the ratio? About 2% of the spirit of the former spirit ends up in the whiskey, potentially up there over a certain period.
2.3%.
Yeah,
2.3. Yeah, to be real clinical, right, Steve?
It's probably a difference too using the dry barrels. I would assume that's going to impact the.
I would say too. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting. Do you mean? I mean, I've never really. If I've heard that, I kind of probably zoned out previously. Do you mean in the sense of, taking note of, I guess, percent alcohol decrease based on?
What I'm talking about is from the Scotch folks like Compass Box or some of the other folks that I've talked with about the process when they're aging their whiskey in that X spirits barrel for about 6 to 9 months of the liquid that's left from the climate culture, it's pulling that extra wine out back into the whiskey now.
Yeah.
So now you're obviously adding flavor from the barrel, but you're also adding wine or the former product
Sure.
into the whiskey, which creates it. That's where you got. I mean, the color on this port barrel is spectacular.
Yeah,
It is
it's
spectacular.
super dark and ruby like.
Yeah. To say that
I follow
there's
what you're
probably
saying.
not port wine in there would be just 2 to 3 years is an amazing amount of time because it's just spectacular.
Yeah, I'm following you now. I guess I don't have a metric for the additive component other than that. I mean, it's undeniable that it is, but it's just, I think to me, the method in which it's happening, whether it's being expressed from the oak via heat, cool, things moving in and out. I guess I'm more attracted to the change in flavor profile over time, the marrying over time, and to me, what's more like, I don't know, for lack of a better term, like to me, it's like a gamesmanship of letting the whiskey get to the port versus, just letting them hit each other in the face.
Yeah, no, agreed. Because you can tell anybody doing 6 months, 8 months, they're trying to get a product on the shelf immediately. 2 to 3 years means you're actually creating art, is what I'm really getting at. You're really creating something that's unique on your own, and it's what I love about what you do.
Well, I appreciate that. I guess from my perspective, the reason for the wait is because we don't know. We don't have this legacy or texts from generations of distillers. Everything we do is such an approach to like, hey, let's find out. And I'm always like delicate in letting my wife know that that's what we're doing. Because I've said this before, but early on she asked me, she's like, "You sure American single malt is a good idea?" I was like, "Sure." And I didn't know. I was nervous. That was terrible. But
you're not going to tell her. It's going to be fine.
But we want to try these things, and it's let's see what happens. It's still sitting in the barrels. That's another thing I kind of touched on earlier. But let's see, I think we've done 3 bottlings of our port cask finish, and we'll do fairly small bottlings, maybe like 500 bottles at a time. We still have that product sitting in those barrels that's continuously getting, older. So we'll see where the next release goes and tastes like.
Well, I like what that gentleman just said. I don't know his name, the guy you were just talking to about the color. Because when I open up my box, and Stephanie knows that I'm a port guy, without even looking at the labels, I knew by the color which one was the port, just by the color of it. And I could pick it out just by the color. And it's my favorite by far right now. I'm just a port fanatic, you know what I'm saying? So I love it. It's a great port, and it's awesome.
Thanks, man. Yeah, this is a fun one for me. I think, as I've continuously said, it's fun for us to push the bounds and make things that catch people off guard. And, what is craft whiskey all about, if not that? It's
right.
There's already great stuff from the heritage brands. Let's do different things.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And we have one more tonight. It is also an American single
Boy,
malt.
Stephanie's pushing it right now, ain't you?
No, I'm not. I just want to respect everybody's time. But yeah, and we can always go back through these too. Like, there's really no rush, but I do want to make sure we get through all of them for everybody.
So this one is almost 3 years from its original release. This was the first release within our Progeny series. You can see it says Progeny Series 1, American Single Malt Whiskey, Cultura Cask Finished, which doesn't really mean anything. It was kind of hard to describe what this one was all about, so on the label anyway, but I can do it for you. The reason why this one's last is, to me, this is the most dessert-like as we're progressing past the port cask finish. This one, in the spirit of collaborations with other makers, I mentioned I like chocolate. I wanted to find a bean to bar, like authentic chocolate producer in Colorado that was making awesome stuff. And I found that in Cultura Chocolate. I got a hold of about 8 of their single origin chocolate bars, found the one that I thought paired best with our single malt. And then I hit them up and got, I think it was like 30 pounds of Guatemalan roasted cacao that we then dumped into our barrels and poured about a bottle of American single malt in there with each barrel. And then every day or so, we'd rotate them around so there was contact time. We were ultimately trying to season barrels with this flavor, which is, cacao is the fruit that is ultimately fermented and made into chocolate. So in a sense, you could think of it as like, if you think of how a port barrel was our start for the last one, nobody really puts cacao in barrels, so we did. But then after 3 months, we dumped all of that out there, which was a huge pain in the ass. The cacao nibs are like, I don't know what to describe them as. Like they're super small little chunks, but they clog up the bunghole and you can't get any of them out. I was just rolling them around in little piles deposit all over the place. Eventually, like I would just put a stick up in there, but it took a while, but we got them all out there.
McNew, be professional. McNew.
If somebody was
make it again, I'm like, no, you make it again. It was a pain. I don't want to do it again. But
yeah, if somebody was watching that didn't know what we were talking about, it would seem really pornographic.
Yeah, no sound bites.
It's all clean fun.
No sound bites. Everything has to be in context.
Yeah. But ultimately, that was my way of making a cacao seasoned barrel or barrels. I think we did 4 of them. And then we put, again, we never put anything less than 2 years. That's our minimum starting point for anything that's going to be finished. We put our 2-year matured American single malt in these cacao seasoned casks. And I don't recall, I want to say it was 6 months matured in those until I was like, there's so much flavor going on that now's the time to cut it off, or let it stop and be what it is. I love legit chocolate, as I've said, and this to me exudes that. It's got the qualities of, those things, the raisiny notes, the slight fruit notes, but curious to see what you guys think.
Kevin Rose was saying in the chat, like a chocolate covered orange. I was personally getting like chocolate covered cherries, like a dark chocolate. Yeah. And John says dark chocolate. Rick, we haven't heard much from the legend tonight. What do you think?
Well, I was going to say the podcast was my favorite. Then I tried this. This is fantastic.
It's just different. It's not our standard style by any means, but it's
no, especially since I'm like you. I eat chocolate almost every day. I've been in Costa Rica and places and pick cacao off the trees and whatnot. So
yeah. And then kind of fun interplay with this chocolate maker is they started to make a chocolate bar where they took their cacao and soaked it in our American single malt and then used that for the chocolate bar.
Ooh. Justine's like really wrapping it up perfect for me, like cherry Tootsie Pop, because like, like a Tootsie Pop's not that overly gross sweet chocolate like that.
Yeah, that's good.
Makes sense.
Is this one for sale on the website, Lenny?
Well, this one is completely sold out. We've got like 3 cases left at the distillery.
So the answer is yes, then. Yeah. Cool. Cool.
Buying them all, so.
Good deal. I thought he was going to say no. So yeah, no, he said yes, folks. We'll get on that. So
definitely not on the website because that means I have to send it to. Yeah, just so you guys know, I mean, and you might be aware, there's interesting things, in my opinion, happening in the get whiskey shipped to your door landscape, and it's not, producers have a hard time with it. Kentucky made a bold move in allowing it, which is awesome. Hopefully other states follow suit. But there are companies that are starting to emerge that are acting as like kind of middlemen to allowing the process to happen. So from our website, folks can order products that we distribute to California and hopefully soon New York, and whichever liquor store is closer will ship to your door. If any of you have ordered from our website and haven't gotten it yet, my bad. We're trying to fix some distribution bonus. I actually sent a lot of angry emails today, but yes, a lot of our stuff can be ordered through our website, our rye, our single malt, the hickory smoked corn whiskey, our gin, something else I'm forgetting. Not Progeny 1, which we barely have any left of. So, but you can come visit.
Just on a note about visiting, could you talk a little bit about your staff and how big your staff is and who the people are that work for you? I'm
Yeah,
with
we've
you.
got, I mean, it
Excellent.
varies throughout the year, but we typically have about 8 to 10 folks, 5 are full-time. Um, I've got, I had a long time, I hate to even call him an assistant. He was my right hand and did everything. He recently acquired a liquor store and I knew he always wanted to. So that was a huge loss for me. I might have cried a little bit. But I do have a new right hand who I moved up in Nick's place. So Mike Blaze is our lead distiller now. He really handles the majority of our production. And at this point, I weigh in and stick my nose in everything, but I'm not in the day-to-day mashing or turning on the still, making the cuts as much as just checking on how everything's going.
Right. So you just have one person or two on the distillery floor?
We typically have two. We have one right now. We're trying to hire another.
Oh, very cool. And just another question. I'm so curious about your operation because your product is beautiful. I just
Oh, you
want
got to go
say
there. His distillery is
so
fantastic. You
so
got to go there.
impressed. Oh my gosh. So how much do you produce a year and what's your output?
It's pretty small. I mean, we'll fill about 200 or so barrels a year. And then on top of that, maybe 500 gallons of gin, which doesn't go in barrels.
Okay.
So pretty small. And we've thought about scaling up. For those who have seen us, it's like a sardine can of a distillery in terms of how tight equipment is packed in. I used to joke around, but it's not a joke. Our distillery was built by me to fit the button of my cap when I walk by things. And then we hired people who were taller than me. And
Yeah.
Most are. Yeah.
You
most
hired
are.
you hired any tasters?
Yeah. We I guess where was I going with that? So we have, I think in my opinion, we have the ability to turn out a lot more whiskey than what we do based on our equipment itself. In fact, we don't even produce in the summer just because, it's hot out, which
right.
It is a little trickier. The fermentations are trickier. Even things like our chiller has to work extra hard to cool down the glycol. So it's easier to stop in the summer, but then that also means we get to go mountain biking and kayaking more.
Yeah. So do you have a Colorado craft whiskey license, or how does that work? I mean, I'm a New York person, so
got it. Yeah.
Talk about that. What the restrictions and advantages are for you as a whiskey maker in Colorado, being a smaller business.
Right. I think, I don't know that we have advantages because we're small per se, but in Colorado,
yeah.
So we can sell cocktails, we can sell bottles direct to the public.
Oh, nice.
Is in a pretty heavily tourist traffic town, not as heavy as Aspen or Vail, but we get a good crowd, and that's an advantage. We can technically self-distribute, but that's the pits. I mean, that we don't do that. We work with a great distributor, and they product everywhere.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm super blown away. I didn't know anything about your whiskey before I came to this meeting, and so incredible and so just creative and unique and lovely. Thank you.
It's that's the fun, and no reason to do it if it's not that. So.
I know, right? Yeah. Very excited about your.
Folks have probably heard, but I always do encourage people to come out to visit because, I don't want to disparage any other areas, but I think we're a pretty fun place to check out.
First of all, you're Colorado, so that sells itself. I mean, anybody who goes to Colorado is going to enjoy themselves. It's a beautiful state. You're in a beautiful country there, so that itself is going to bring people there. And besides, your product is awesome, so why not visit? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fun place to see. I think our taste room experience is an interesting one. It's small, but it's fun. And I don't know if I know you guys, you can come over to the Rack House and we can break out the long straws and sip out of the barrel.
I'm definitely gonna visit without a doubt.
the downtown area, which where Lenny is exactly in, right in the middle of. I mean, it's like a Norman Rockwell painting. I mean, it's a cool city.
Yeah.
When you go there, it just has the instant feel like, man, I'd like to live here. I mean, it's
Right.
it's a
right.
really neat place to go. His setup is good because he's got that great outdoor area right next to his. They got food there. They've got the courtyard where you can sit and drink. They make the cocktails, and of course the distillery's there. And then hanging out with Lenny is fun. He's a great guy.
Yeah, it's fun. It's we something that we've become known for. I don't know if it was intentional. I guess it was. When we have accounts come up to do single barrel picks, although Steve, you kind of timed it off of the summer. In the summer, we'll typically take our accounts down the river, or recently we took the Bluegrass, which is a really great bourbon bar in just outside of Denver. We took them out on side-by-sides out in the mountains, and they had a great time. I thought I was going to die. I mean, I
You
would
may
have
be getting
thought-
too old for this stuff. You keep hurting yourself during all these things.
Yeah, I know. I'm getting old. I gotta stop doing this. But point being, it's a very fun barrel pick experience because I think if folks go to Four Roses or anywhere, they're gonna have amazing experiences that we can't replicate that, but we can take people out to have a lot of fun and then come back and sip on some barrels. So that's what we do, and it's we're all about the experience. To me, I think that's what it's all about. Be it like any form of whiskey or spirit is about creating something with depth and character and sharing it, and all of these experiences parlay together, and it's a lot of fun. So.
Right, awesome. So I'm going to turn off the recording and wrap this one up. Everybody's welcome to hang out if they want to, but Lenny, let people know where to find you, your website, your social medias, wherever they want to find you.
Totally. Well, our website is deerhammer.com, and there's a bunch about us, some videos, and as I mentioned, you can certainly order our products online, and it might take about 2 weeks to get to you, but you can try our stuff from pretty much any state. On social media, at Deerhammer on pretty much all of the social medias, and as I said, I think anybody who wants to come see us, drop me a line, Lenny@deerhammer.com. Let me know if you're going to be in town, and I'll try to be around.
Great, perfect. And you can find us, abvnetwork.com, and check out the podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts, Bourbon Daily, Bourbon Show. Check us out. Bye, everybody.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Lenny.
Oh, and
Lenny, you hanging out a little bit or what?